Hello, and welcome to Excel Skills for Improvement Advisors. I'm Richard Scoville, faculty for the IHI Improvement Advisor Program. The ability to manage data with Excel is an essential skill for IAs. The videos in this series provide guidance for using some of the Excel templates and tutorials that I've prepared to help students in the IA program become more proficient using spreadsheets. These are some of the Excel features we'll explore in this brief video. I assume that you've used Excel before and that you're familiar with the basic concepts and commands. If not, you may want to work through some of the instructional materials that you can readily find on YouTube or in your local bookstore. In other videos, we'll be working with standard examples in the IA Data Tools database file. But in this first video, I want to show you a few tips and tricks, commands and keyboard shortcuts that'll come in handy when you start to work through the exercises. This is the spreadsheet that we'll be working with. Let's start with a brief tour. As I move around with my mouse pointer, clicking on cells, I can look up here at the top of the screen at the formula bar, which will show me the contents of the cells that I've highlighted. So here are numbers that we see for data, and here are labels. The spreadsheet shows the kilowatt hours used in a small business with 4 different sites over a year's period of time. One of the first things I'd like to do is to summarize the data, to add up the total kilowatt hours used across all 4 sites for each month. So I'm going to begin by entering a formula to make that calculation using the sum function. I'm going to begin my formula here in cell G6 by typing the equals sign and then the name of the function, which in this case is sum, a left parenthesis, and then I highlight the cells that contribute to that total. Close the parenthesis by typing a right parens, and then enter. And now notice that what I see in the cell is the value of the sum, but what I see in the formula bar is different. It's the formula that's actually calculating that sum. Now I could repeat that process 11 more times to calculate the total for each of the remaining months, but I don't have to. I can copy this formula and get those totals very quickly. So my first tip here is the Control-C keystroke to make a copy of that cell. Control-C, I highlight the destination cells that are going to get the copies, and I press Control-V to put those copies in place. And there they are. And you'll notice as I highlight each cell that the references of the sum function have shifted. Each formula sums its own row, and that's the basic nature of copying formulas, so that the references shift according to the location of the formula, which is just how we want it to work in this case. I'm going to do one more calculation here, which is to calculate an average for each of the 4 sites. There are many functions in Excel. We're just showing 2 here, but there are many others as well. Such as count and min and max and median and other useful things. But let's start with the equal sign. I'll type the name of the function, which is average. Left parens, highlight the cells that contribute to the average, close the parenthesis, and enter. Now this time, instead of using Control-C and Control-V to make those copies, here's another shortcut. At the lower right corner of this cell is a little green square called the fill handle. If I put my mouse pointer on it and drag to fill the destination, you'll see what happens. I get copies of that formula the same way I did with Control-V and Control-C. So if I want to copy into a contiguous space like this, very simple to do. Now these numbers that I end up with are showing up in a variety of numerical formats, and I'd like to standardize that. So let me select that group of cells, and here's another trick. The right mouse button brings up a context menu. And one of the options there is to format the cell. This right mouse button works in many, many situations to bring up options for formatting or changing entries. So for those averages, I want a number format, just one decimal place, and a thousand separator, comma to separate the thousands and hundreds. And there we are with a nice consistent format for those averages. Now, one thing about formulas, when we make copies, they shift, as we just said. Sometimes that's not what we want. If I select those averages, for example, Control C to copy, and I were to copy them down here, you see what happens. I get errors because those formulas are trying to take the average of empty cells on row 18. Not what I was looking to do. Instead, if I want to copy formulas to a different place but preserve the values, again, I'll use Control C to make a copy, pick my destination, but this time I'm using the paste special command and selecting values. When I copy using paste special values, what you see is that the copies no longer contain formulas. They're now just the values, just the numbers that represent those totals. This is handy in many situations where we need to convert from formulas to numbers or where we want to copy into a prepared spreadsheet without disturbing the contents of the destination cells. And we'll see more examples of those in subsequent videos. One more formula trick here. I want to, for next year, I want to reduce my electricity usage by 20%. And I want to calculate what that would mean for the total for the 4 sites for each month. So I'm going to put in my goal amount here, which is going to be 0.8, and format it to show percentages. And that looks good. So my goal for January, equal sign, I want the sum for the 4 sites, asterisk for multiplication times 80%. So there's my goal for the 4 sites for January for next year. And now if I copy that formula down, I'm going to be in trouble because you can see that the cell H4 that contains the goal has shifted in each copy. There's H5 and H6 and so on. In this case, that's not what I want. Using the delete key to clear those cells. I'm going to enter this formula again. Equals cell G6 times H4. But before I press enter, I'm using function key F4 on my keyboard to add dollar signs to that cell address. And you can see it happening here and here. Press enter, I get the same value. But this time when I make copies, I'm getting sensible results. The dollar signs have caused that cell address, H4, to remain constant in each of the copies. Each of the formulas is multiplying its yearly total times, or monthly total, times the value in H4. That's exactly what I wanted to see here. Absolute cell addresses. Okie doke. Let's take another step. Okay. Now on this spreadsheet, we have a list of numbers, some data, and as I scroll up and down, you can see that it's quite a long list of numbers. I'm going to be, these numbers represent data from successive days, let's say starting on January the 1st, 2013. Now, I can enter dates as in the previous spreadsheet, just as simple text labels, but there's a better way. If I enter a date using a recognized date format like 1/1/13, When I enter that value, you can see that Excel has translated my entry into an actual date value, which is a special data type in Excel. I'm going to come down to the second cell, enter the date for January the 2nd to, 1, 2, 13. Same thing happened. I don't particularly like the looks of these data formats. I'd rather just see the month and the day for the display of these values. So again, I've selected these two cells. I'm going to right-click and choose Format Cells. And then in the menu, I'm choosing a more attractive format to display those numbers in. So again, the value 1/1/2013 was displayed in the cell using that format is shown. I could make continue this this series entering, but of course there's a shortcut for that. If I pull the fill handle down, I have those first two cells selected, which kind of kick off a series of one day at a time. And if I pull it down, you can see that Excel continues the series that was started in those first two cells. Right? So that's kind of cool. I can also shortcut that process again. If I've got the two cells highlighted, I can double-click on that fill handle, and Excel will look at the adjacent column of data and automatically create a continuing series of entries to match the ones in the adjacent column. That's really kind of nice. One more basic move here would be to make selections and move around in a large table of data. So we know that we can use the mouse pointer to select cells, and we can use the arrow keys to move around in a range. If I press the Control key while I and then press the down arrow key, I'm holding the Control key down while I press the up and down arrow keys. You can see that Excel zooms to the end of that filled series of cells. That's kind of quick. And moreover, if I hold down the Shift key while I press the down arrow key, it selects those cells as I go. So if I wanted to select that entire column and change the numeric format, or make a copy of those cells, it's very easy to make that selection. One more step. To put I can see that I'd like to have a title at the top of this table, but I haven't left room for it. A basic move is to insert cells. I'm clicking on the row number to select the entire row of entries, and then a right-click brings up the menu with the Insert command. And now I've inserted a row into which I can enter a label. Finally, it's often useful in a list of data like this. It's often necessary to sort data like this in numeric order. To accomplish that, I'm going to pick a cell inside the column that'll determine the order of the sort, and then I'm going to use my Data command to bring up the Data menu. And I'm going to use the Z to A button here to sort that table of data in the proper order. Excel is smart enough to recognize what to sort based on the labels at the top of the column and the values in the column. To put them back into date order, fairly simple to select the date column, Data menu, A to Z, and I'm back in the original order. So there you have it. Some basic moves in Excel We've talked about copying and pasting using a couple of different shortcuts, Control V and Control C, and the fill handle. We've talked about entering formulas and functions. We've talked about paste special to remove formulas and to copy into templates without disturbing the destination formatting. We've talked about the right-click option for context menus, using absolute cell addresses, entering dates and changing date formats, and then navigating bigger tables of data with Control up arrow, Control down arrow, and then the Shift keys to select data as we go. Inserting and deleting rows and sorting. And don't forget, the fill handle is that little green square at the corner, and you can get access to additional functions beyond the ones we've demonstrated here by using the function button up on near the formula bar. Thanks very much.